recently found your website while researching the technology of ghost hunting for a university project and noticed your email address for real-life ghost accounts. This is a description of something that happened whilst I was away at college in London, England, and this is really the reason I became interested in the supernatural. I'm afraid I don't have any photographs or anything. I went to college to study theater, stage management, and technical stuff like lighting and sound at a place called Mount View Conservatory for the Performing Arts in North London. It is very old, probably mid to late Victorian, owned by an entrepreneur who turned it into a theater school back to the 1950s, I believe. Originally, it was only used for private classes for 2 or 3 people, but over the years it has been built up, with later parts of the building added onto the structure of the original house. For example, the main theater is called the Mount View and was stuck directly onto the facade of the house, covering what was the front garden, and a tree growing up through that garden still grows through the stage left wing. They simply built the theater around it. The other theater, simply a black, box-shaped room that could be adapted to any sort of play or stage shape just by setting up decking, was called the Judi Dench, named after the actress who was one of the sponsors. There's a narrow corridor between the two, with the dressing rooms on one side, used by both theaters, and with a door on each end, and the workshops for props and model making on the other. The building here is quite old and rickety, complete with creaky floorboards. The incident I remember most, there were actually several weird ones, was at the beginning of my second year, around late July. I was the company stage manager for a production of the Judi Dench. We ran our own shows in the second year, as though we were a professional company, and so, as CMM, one of my jobs was to open up the theater first thing in the morning and get it ready for the actors and crew. I had to unlock the doors, starting with the lighting box for the Judi Dench, as unlocking this door also switched off the silent motion detector alarm inside the theater. I was the only one from our company to be in that morning, arriving just before 8 a.m. The duty member of staff opened the front door and went to turn off the alarm in the Mount View, while I went off to see to the Judi Dench. I was going through the corridor from the Mount View and was heading for the lighting box to turn off the alarm when I heard someone walk across the stage area. It was totally dark, as you have to get into the box to turn the lights on as well, so I didn't see who it was, but I heard them go up the small flight of steps leading up to the dressing room corridor, and the dressing room door slammed. It was very quiet, with no one else around yet, and the sounds were quite clear. At first, I thought one of the actors must have got in via the dressing rooms, which could have been open from the Mount View side, had got onto the stage, and then realized that the alarm was still on, so had run to get out. I opened the box and put on the lights, and then went to find the staff member to tell him, in case the alarm had tripped and the police were on their way. Before heading back to the Mount View side of the building, I went to check the dressing rooms first to make sure they were all unlocked. When I got there, they were all still locked, including the one I had heard close, and when I later found the staff member, I was told that no one had been in the dressing rooms, and that there was in fact no one else in the building either. I know this sounds ridiculous, and to begin with, I thought I must have been tired, having worked till 11 p.m. the night before, but later, I was talking to one of the other students who was working on another production. She told me that once, while working late in the props room, she had heard someone pacing up and down in the corridor, the same one that runs by the Judi Dench. She had been so annoyed by this disturbance that she had told the duty staff member off for it when they were leaving at the end of the night. There was only the two of them in the building that night, and according to the lecturer, he had been in the office at the opposite end of the building all night, surfing the net. Another older student later asked me, when we were talking about our experiences, if there was an acoustic piano being played in the show I was working on. When I said yes, she just nodded, as though this explained everything. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but the older girl said that this sort of thing happened often when there was a real piano being played, as opposed to electric clairvoyant being used for the show. Apparently, this house was originally used at the turn of the century as a private girls' boarding school. One of the girls was allegedly found dead on the front lawn, as though she had fallen through the upstairs window, but there was no explanation of how she ended up there. That window, a bay window, is still visible, Incorporated into the brickwork in the Mountain Theater, in the stage right wing and above prompt corner, where the deputy stage manager sits, due to cue the show. According to the other students, several of them felt as though they were being watched while they were cueing a show, and the effect is always said to be heightened when there is piano music. They say that the girl liked to play the piano. Again, I have to say that I've never seen anything substantial, beyond a sort of grayish shadow once in one of the wings, and I've never seen any actual reports of the girl's death, like newspaper clippings, etc. But there's definitely something odd about the whole building. One student described it as sick, but after the boarding school moved out, the building was used as a hospital for shell-shock patients during and after World War I, so there could be many explanations for the noises and feelings. I just found your website and find it fascinating. I lived in the same house for 44 years in New Paltz, New York. I'm convinced that there are spirits in the house. Here are a few stories. I always had a very uncomfortable feeling about a particular room in the house. I was less than 3 years old when my grandfather took an overdose of a diabetes medication, Dibanus. It had just come out. He took about 60 pills in an hour because he forgot he took them. My mother found him unconscious in that room. He died a few days later because when they pumped his stomach, an ulcer ruptured and he bled to death. My father was ill for 8 years with a neurological disease, Steele-Richardson syndrome. The VA provided a hospital bed when he was home. He was in that room. Several years later, my sister was ill with cancer. She was in that room and died in that bed. A year later, my mother, who was also ill with cancer, was in that room. She died in that bed. I kept hearing noises in the house. I would be downstairs, and the only one home. I could hear movement upstairs, like someone else was there. My mother and I had a habit of watching the 11 o'clock news, and then going to bed. One night, I was on one side of the living room, and got up to turn off the TV at 11:30. I saw a small circle of light at the bottom of the TV stand. When I got to the TV, it was as if an invisible wall went up. I was only about 2 to 3 inches from the TV knobs, but until that light went away, I could not reach them. It must have been my mother. A few days earlier, my friend and I were sitting in the living room across from each other talking. All of a sudden, he got a strange look on his face. He saw a small ball of light move just off the floor near the fireplace in the other side of the room, and then disappear. About 2 years before my sister died, she went on a Trey's Dies weekend and got a cross. It was on one of her dressers in my brother's room. I had a tenant in my sister's room. He thought he heard someone come in earlier, but was not sure. The house was on the market, and repairs were being made. We went upstairs, and I instinctively flipped on the switch that turned the light on in the room. The light went on, so we realized it had been the repairman. My tenant noticed the cross and suggested we bring it downstairs. I took his advice and hung it on the mirror on the opposite wall of the death room. That cross moved for 4 hours non-stop that night. Sometimes it will move up and down, like on a heartbeat. Sometimes it will move side to side, like a pendulum. That cross still moves to this day. I took it with me when I moved to Colorado 3.5 years ago. It has nothing to do with any kind of draft, open window, etc. I firmly believe my sister is still with me. Also ghost related is the story of my father. He died February 18th, 1981. It rained the day of his funeral. It rained on the way to the funeral home. It stopped so we could go inside. It rained while we were inside. It stopped so we could come out. It rained on the way to the church. It stopped so we could go inside. It poured like no tomorrow, all through Mass. It stopped so we could come out. It rained on the way to the cemetery, and you get the idea. It started again when we left. From that day on, till I moved in 1999, if I went to the cemetery in the rain, it would rain on the way up, stop while I was there, and start again when I left. My girlfriend witnessed this one night, and it freaked her out. She thought I was joking. Here's a story about my mother. She always promised me she would come back and help me if she could after she died. Well, she died on a Wednesday morning. I had to drive up to northern New Jersey Thursday night to pick up my brother and sister-in-law for the funeral. I forgot to gas up on the way out of New Jersey. I looked at my gas gauge after I passed the rest stop between Newborough exit and the New Paltz exit on the New York State Freeway. I had less than 1/8 of a tank of gas. I asked Mom to get me home. I hit empty about 2 to 3 miles before the exit. I pulled into the gas station across the exit on fumes. To this day, I've not run out of gas. I do not make it a habit of waiting until I am empty to fill up. I believe she is still with me and watching over me. After the death of my sister and my mother, I was so devastated, I tried suicide. I took some pills and put a frozen solid piece of London broil in tomato sauce. I checked it after an hour or so and found it had not cooked much. I took some more pills and decided to turn it off in an hour or so. I woke up 10 hours later to go to work. The gas was off. It was charcoal when I lifted the lid. The next day, my supervisor told me my mother had come to her and told her to tell me she came down and turn off the gas so nothing would happen to me. Before I explain what happened, it would probably make more sense to describe my situation. I'm a 20-year-old male living in a city on the northern western shore of Lake Superior called Thunder Bay. Me and my 2 brothers were not living with my parents, who were separated at the time. Instead, my brothers, both of which were younger, one was 15 and the other was 17 when I was 18, lived with my aunt as foster children, and I lived on my own. We were just getting closer to my mom, and we paid a visit to her every weekend. One week, she decided that she was going to go on a fishing trip. My mom and her boyfriend invited me and my brothers, but I decided not to go. A choice that may have saved my life, or led half my family into an early grave, because the only one to survive the trip was my youngest brother. Before they left, my other uncle, who lives downstairs from the aunt and uncle my brothers were living with, saw Andrew and said that he looked almost colorless or gray and that something was very wrong. He didn't mention it after it happened because it didn't make any sense to him at the moment. During the trip, they went fishing and the boat they were in flipped over. They all drowned except my youngest, who made it to shore by hanging onto the boat. Now that you know the history, this is where things started to get weird. Since I stayed at the home during the trip, I had no idea what happened. My aunt and uncle drove my brother home after the ordeal that night, but I wasn't told about it until the next morning. But that same night, when he went home, my alarm clock fell to the floor. Now that may not sound strange, but it was not close to the edge, and there was no way that I could have pulled it down since the cord was leading away from the bed. After the funeral, my uncle, the one who lived downstairs from them, started seeing the brother who died, standing in the door of his room at the corner of his eye. He would turn that way, but no one was there. My uncle was not one who would lie about something like that, or sees things that aren't there, so I believe him totally. About a month or 2 after his death, and my mother's death, I moved in with my fiance downstairs from her parents. I needed to get surgery to fix my nose and take my tonsils out at the same time. My fiance drove me to the hospital on the day of the surgery, and I suddenly felt sad because I knew my mother wouldn't be able to be there for me. I went into the OR and obviously didn't stay awake for it. My fiance, however, sat outside the doors to the hall that led to the OR, which was pretty close to her. I was taking abnormally long to finish, which my fiance should know since she is a nurse, and was getting worried when she saw a lady in purple walk to the door of my room. My fiance does not make up stories and is very reliable, but she still swears that it was my mother. Before she entered my room, she turned and smiled at my fiance, then went in. A few minutes later I came out, but my mother wasn't seen again. When I came to, I was told by the doctor that they had trouble bringing me back from the anesthetic. Maybe that's why my mom was there. More things happened, like a clear knocking on our door, but no one is there, and other things similar. We aren't the only ones who experienced this. My aunt had new foster kids after my surviving brother moved out, 2 girls and 1 boy. The 2 girls slept in my brother's old room and were so terrified that they wanted their brother to sleep in there with them. The next morning, after he slept in that room, he told my aunt that he couldn't sleep very well. When asked why, he said that his sisters kept hearing things and waking him up. He also told her that his sister saw a boy. We think it might have been my brother, but who knows? I haven't experienced much since, and my experiences might seem insignificant to some, but for me, it's kinda creepy. That's my story. I hope it gets to you okay this time, without half the story disappearing. My name is Erica, and I had an experience once at a dorm I was staying in over the weekend. I was 17 or 18, I'm not too sure now. I'm from El Paso, Texas, and I was staying at the University of Texas at El Paso. Now, I'd never really heard about anything strange going on at these dorms we were staying at until my experience was shared. I was coming to the end of a very long day. I'd woken up early around 5 a.m. to get ready for the science fair. No, that isn't the reason for going to the university, but it is part of the story. I went to the science fair and was there almost all day. I ended around 3 in the afternoon. I was in a rush to finish because I was meeting my friends at UTEP to begin another season of the Young Leaders Conference. I was very excited to see all my friends, but I was also very tired. The conference went underway and it finished into the night, as it always had every year. By the time we did room check, I was extremely exhausted. I was a counselor at the time, so we did room check, and then all of us were going to hang out that night on the floor above to eat pizza and see how everyone was. I was rooming with my best friend named Veronica. She came in, let me know where everyone was going to meet, and if I was interested in pitching in for pizza. I told her that I was too exhausted to eat, and that I just thought it'd be best to go straight to bed. I told her that she could go on without me, and if she wouldn't mind being very quiet when she came in, so she would not wake me. She was fine with that, and said she would see me in the morning, and asked me to wake her up when I got up the next day. I agreed and went to sleep. I have to explain to you the way the dorm room looked. When you walked into the room, the beds were against the wall, on the same wall. They were parallel to the wall, and the only thing between them was a sink. All the closets and cabinets were on the opposite side of the room. When I slept, I put my head towards the door and my feet towards the window. There was a window on the opposite side of the room from the floor. I enjoyed sleeping in that bed every year because I liked looking out the window. The whole room was dark and I was getting pretty sleepy. I guess I must have gotten to the point where I was finally asleep when things started to happen. I remember that I heard the cabinet door open and slam shut. I really didn't think much of it because I just figured that Veronica came in and the door of the cabinet must have slipped from her hands and slammed shut. I started to get to sleep when I heard the closet door open and shut again. I wasn't agitated, but I forgave her again for it. Finally, the sink light came on. As soon as that happened, I heard the cabinet and closet doors opening and shutting quite fast. Then that the lights for the entire room came on. All this noise at once was just enough to drive me crazy. I finally got fed up with it, so I sat up and yelled towards the window, "Viral, will you knock it off? I'm trying to get some sleep, and I thought I asked you to please be quiet when you came in." At that moment, all the lights went off, and the sink water stopped running. There was no way for all those things to have turned off on their own, all at once, unless there was more than one person in the room. But the funny thing was, now that I realize it, there were no sounds of footsteps. About a half an hour later, Veronica walked back into the room. I'd asked her if she had been in that room just a while back, and her and another friend confirmed to me they had just come back so they could go to bed. This other friend was just walking her back. I never told Vera what happened that night. I never really told anyone about it until I started hearing other people with their own stories. I know for a fact now that someone died in those dorms. I don't know why or how, but I do know They don't house students in those dorms anymore. I still think about it to this day and wonder what that lonely student wanted. Was I in their room, or did they just feel like causing some hell and annoying me? I guess I'll never know. Hi. Hi, it's me, Phantom. I just want to say hi and remember, eat some macaroni while you can because that shit's hot and it's not going away until you're satisfied. I don't know what that means, guys. Anyway, guys, thank you so much again for tuning in to another Phantom of Darkness narration. I'm glad that I can always be your narrator as usual, and thank you again so much for listening to all these great stories that are included within the narration. Haha, I don't know, guys. Anyway, thanks for understanding that I never make sense always, and thanks for enjoying that I never make sense. It's always a joy to always not make sense to you guys either. But anyway, I'm gonna cut this out and make this outro a little bit shorter than usual. It's probably not gonna be that short actually. But just remember, comment, like, subscribe, share. Just make sure, the video gets out to everybody that you can possibly get. And I'm not gonna edit this out because I was about to mess up again and then I messed up. So what does that tell you? I'm just a noodle pants. Anyway, guys, yeah. Before I sound even more ridiculously stupid than I usually am, I'll sign out. So, good night, good morning. I'll see you in the next video, guys, and I'll talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.